And welcome back onto the Just College Hoops show. It has been a little bit. Happy New Year to everyone. I think we can still say Happy New Year. Hopefully, Larry David allows us to do just that. It's Tim Leonard, Brian McLaughlin to fill you in on everything going on in the world of college hoops. We'll be here weekly throughout the rest of the season. And then once we get into March Madness, we'll be dropping more podcasts, of course, once it gets to that time of the year. But a lot going on in college hoops once again, Brian. We're officially done with college football. It was kind of a whimper of a national championship game that was put to bed last night. So now it's all college hoops the rest of the way. I'm sure we get some fans tuning in for the first episode of the year today and stuff like that, because I know that a lot of fans don't really zero in on college basketball till we get to this time of the year. And it's hard to believe, but we are to this time of the year where it's conference games the rest of the way, and college basketball will be the center of the college sports world for a little bit.
Yeah, Tim, it's great to be back with you. I'm excited to kind of be able to fully focus on college basketball, I guess, is now it's not that you and I aren't already very dialed into what's going on every day around the sport, but it feels like this is college basketball's time of the year that they can take control of. And so I'm excited for that. I'm excited for what all these coaches call their second season. They kind of in their brains split it up between the non-con and now their conference slates. And so it is a really fun time of year for the sport. I've kind of got a take for you off the top, kind of about this time of year that I would love to just run by you, and about one team in particular that I would just like to start our show about today, if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely. Let's
All
hear it.
right. Well, let me start with just this. It's of course what everybody in the sport is talking about. It's the biggest story really in collegiate athletics, in my opinion. The biggest game of the weekend, the pageantry of a game that's being held at a neutral site, featuring a team being led by a head coach who's gone through suspensions, gone through controversy this season. And that's right. I'm talking about the Michigan Wolverines. They led the game early, but then kind of just took the foot off the gas. And unlike in football, Ace Baldwin and DeMarco Dunn take over. And that's right. My Penn State Nittany Lions beat Juwan Howard. They beat the Michigan Wolverine basketball team at the Palestra. I don't care about their national championship in football. It's basketball season, baby. And unlike Penn State's football program, Tim, Mike Rhodes already with wins over Ohio State and Michigan. Penn State basketball's back, Tim. I mean, I am fired up about my Nittany Lions again.
Wow, Mike Rhodes can win the big one, apparently. That's what we're finding out.
Take notes, James Franklin.
Yeah,
Take
seriously.
notes. That's all I have to say. We don't have to spend too much time on this, but that was my favorite basketball game in about a week's worth. And just had to poke a little fun at Michigan there while I'm at it. I have to take that opportunity when I can, you know?
Yeah, how many coaches are suspended in men's college basketball and football right now, or have been suspended at some point this year? And Michigan, like you said, has two of them. A little bit different reasoning and everything, and I can't even keep up with what's going on with Juwan Howard. It was looking like for a while he was going to be out the door, like permanently, and now it seems like everything's all good. There's just been some weird rumblings there. The other one that, I mean, I think every podcast I might open for the rest of the season wondering how Kenny Payne still has a job at Louisville. Because I get that they're just going to fire him at the end of the year, but what are we waiting for? Because it's not changing, and I guess they're probably saving themselves some money by getting to the finish line this year. But man, I just can't fathom that fan base is okay with watching the product one more game that Kenny Payne in Louisville is putting out right now.
I just generally feel bad watching Louisville. Like it hurts me to turn them on just because like you know the kids are down bad. Like you feel for those players, you feel for the guys on staff. Obviously everybody there I'm sure is working extremely hard trying to win, but it just has not worked since really day one for Kenny Payne. And to put a bow on the Michigan thing, Tim, did you see that in this game against Penn State, Juwan Howard he was on the bench. He's no longer suspended, but he chose to act as an assistant coach for the game and have Philadelphia legend Phil Martelli, who has been filling in for him as the head coach, as the head man during this game. So it was Martelli walking the sidelines. Juwan Howard chose to sit on the bench. Could you imagine if, like, say that happened for the Michigan football team? If Jim Harbaugh came back and was like, actually, guys, I'm going to be coordinator today. We're going to have Sharon Moore, who was the fill-in head coach. He's going to be the head man for today's game. I'm taking a step back. just an unbelievable decision to me for Juwan Howard. And I understand he was doing it to honor Martelli, who his son Jimmy is on the Penn State staff as well. So a nice day for the Martellis, but still a
Yeah.
bonkers decision to me by Juwan Howard to basically give up the reins on a game that he wasn't even suspended for.
Maybe the honoring would make more sense if Jimmy Martelli was the head coach of Penn State. And then it's like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. Son versus father walking the sideline together. But yeah, that's really bizarre. I did not see that at all. And I'm sort of tickled that I didn't even know about it because it feels like that should be a bigger story. Like you said, what coach? I mean, let's face it, all coaches have pretty big egos naturally. And now some bigger than others, and we don't have to get into the list of those coaches, but it feels like naturally when you're the head coach and you're suspended, you're just dying to get back on the sideline and imprint your knowledge on your team and figure these things out. And for Michigan, it hasn't been exactly rosy, especially losing to Penn State. So that's odd. That's really odd. I don't know what to think. I mean, Juwan Howard at the start of that era was really doing pretty well at Michigan and had a good track record of being a longtime NBA assistant. I think he's well viewed by his peers, but some of the incidents he's had and then just some of the bizarreness of how news has trickled out of the recent suspension and no, he's not leaving. He's coming back. Okay, he's back, but he's an assistant, like Letty Martelli. I just don't really like how everything is going there at Michigan. And I wonder if Juwan Howard is long for that job. I wonder what the fan base is thinking. I know they're more focused right now on the national championship football team. And maybe that's why it's not as much of a story, right? I mean, that's probably why I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, I think Juwan Howard is the biggest Michigan football fan in the world, right?
Yeah.
Like he has been fired up about how well that team has done just to take some of the spotlight off of him. I will say there's so many outstanding assistants across the country that similar to what Phil Martelli's done when he has stepped in for Juwan Howard, I think could do a great job as the head coach. So many top tier head coaches that I think do a great job are also really propped up by outstanding staffs. I think so many coaching staffs do so much work behind the scenes that I think goes often
Yeah.
underappreciated. And so I think to be fair, I'm not saying one way or the other whether when Juwan Howard is not on that sideline or when he is sitting on the bench, if Michigan is better or worse. But I do think that credit and blame goes to the staff as well as the head coach when teams are doing well and doing poorly, or at least maybe even more credit should go to the staff in general and not just the head coach. That being said, I have no clue what's going to happen. I mean, he was kind of carried the last couple of years by a unique talent in Hunter Dickinson and had some great kind of players that fit well around Dickinson. And so you're right. Things are going weird for Michigan. We can take a step in another direction now, talk about some other fun games. But as Big Ten play starts, if that kind of championship hangover from the football team starts to creep into that fan base, just keep an eye on Juwan Howard and where he may end up shifting around this offseason.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the fun games, but real quick, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head there when you talked about the assistants, because to me, and we're both in very similar roles for those that aren't following very closely with the podcast, we're play-by-play broadcasters for a specific team. I work for the Syracuse women's basketball team. You work for the Vermont men's basketball team. And one of the biggest takeaways I've had, and I've been a sports fan all my life, obviously, and watched college basketball very closely until the past couple years. Now I'm working with the team and, still watching college hoops. But one of the biggest takeaways I've had is how valuable and how much input assistant coaches have. Now, I don't know if it's just the specific staff I'm on, but even when you're talking about recruiting and who's advocating for certain recruits, who is making recruiting trips, who has utilizing their contacts to get a said recruit. It just feels like it's undervalued. Everyone talks about the head coach, and I think that's right because they're in front and they're handling the questions afterwards, unless you're Mick Cronin, which, by the way, that's a whole nother thing. I know you saw that, I'm sure, but we'll leave that to the side for now. Mick
Forgot
Cronin
about
did
that.
not handle the questions after losing 9 of his last 12 games. But yeah, I just think that's one of the bigger takeaways that's important, like fresh perspective I've had, that and just how valuable like a culture of the team is, because these are college kids and you're kind of reminded of that when you see it up close, that sometimes college kids are just having bad days or sometimes there's stuff off the court that is impacting them, or there's stuff within the team chemistry that is impacting them that the fan base just probably wouldn't realize.
Yeah, it's I think a kind of somebody said the words like Ken Palm has minutes continuity on like as how you track your team's rollover from year to year. Having program continuity is a real thing, and
Yeah.
that's keeping assistant coaches for a long time. Do you have student managers who have been with the program for a couple of years? Do you have players on your program that in this era of the transfer portal and in some ways one and done that are going to keep your culture from year over year? And I'm with you as far as the staff I get to work with here at the University of Vermont. It's a big reason why they've had so much success in this league and at the mid-major level is that John Becker's been here for 13 years, but he's had a staff that have now been with him. Associate head coach Ryan Schneider for almost all of that. And then he's got assistants on his staff that have been with him for a long time as well. So, yeah, I think we're very much on the same page and beyond even just the programs we work with. You can kind of pick up on that when you watch games,
Yeah.
right? You can see which head coaches are yelling at their staff, which coaches are working with their staff. What is that relationship like? And it's something that I know I watch more of when I'm just watching a game on TV than when I was in middle school, high school, even when I was in college. I wasn't paying attention to that. I didn't care what the coaches looked like towards their staff. And that's totally changed my perspective on what even makes a good head coach, I guess.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. All right, let's get into some of the big games that we've missed since we've been on the podcast. First off, Friday night, Purdue, Illinois was a top 10 showdown. Purdue is still the number one team in the country as of the latest AP poll. They're no longer one of the remaining undefeated teams. And actually, there's just one remaining unbeaten team, and that is Houston, which we can get into. But Purdue won this game 83-78. Sort of a misleading score. I mean, they were up really big at home, and give Illinois some credit without Terrence Shannon because of all the news there, which is unfortunate. They are playing without him, and they rallied back. They got a huge game from Damask, who scored 26. He had 32 the game before that against Northwestern, so he's off to a great start in Big Ten play. Without Terrence Shannon, he's kind of become like the number one guy when he was basically the Robin. Now he's the Batman in a way. So I don't know if you have any takeaways off of this game. The biggest thing from a Purdue perspective is 23. And I don't know. I mean, we've been kind of down on Purdue, but they're finding ways to win even when Edie is having an off game, which I think is something that they weren't great at doing last season.
I think first off, it does feel like Purdue has taken a step forward as far as finding a way to win those games when it's not just Zach Edey ball. But I think we have to say that this Illinois team is so obviously different without Terrence Shannon. This
Yeah.
was a guy who was playing at the highest level that a basketball guard can, like he was the best guard in the country throughout the first couple of months in a lot of ways. He has been suspended, quote, indefinitely from all team activities, effective immediately on December 28th. This was after he was charged with rape in Kansas. And then recently, the most recent news is that, quote, Illinois star basketball player Terrence Shannon Jr. filed a temporary restraining order on Monday. That was yesterday after the against the university in an effort to be reinstated after being suspended following that rape charge stemming from an alleged incident that happened when the football team played in Kansas in September. So I don't think we need to get too heavy into those details of Shannon's restraining order, Shannon's suspension. From a basketball standpoint, though, it obviously changes this Illinois team's ceiling in particular. From a basketball standpoint alone, he is an individual talent that they now don't have. And so I was a bit surprised that they played with Purdue as well as they did without him. I think it speaks to how were able to handle some adversity and how that group of players can still have a very successful year without him. But this team was playing like a potential Final Four challenger. And I'm not quite sure if that's something that they will still have the chance to accomplish if Shannon is unavailable. And I would be surprised if Terrence Shannon plays again for Illinois, barring another change as of the current situation.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Shannon was averaging 22 points per game. He was shooting 50% from the floor, 40% from three, 77% from the foul line. And like you said, I mean, he was an All American guard and a fifth year guy that was the engine of their offense. So they've got to figure out kind of how to go about it without him. I think they're just giving Demosk a lot of isolation type of sets, and he is a
Who's
very
a
good
good
player.
player.
Yeah, great player. It's honestly kind of fun to watch because he can score like in tons of different ways from basically like 5 to 15 feet away from the basket. Not that he's a bad shooter, but he just kind of plays like almost bully ball for a guard and backs his way down and gets to the rim or gets to that mid range area.
Part of me is also like with Illinois then. Coleman Hawkins, let's go. Like now's the time to go,
Yeah,
Coleman Hawkins. Like, let's take that step. You've got to be that guy now, along with Damask. And so that to me was my other kind of thought going into the Purdue game. And I mean, Hawkins played fine against Purdue, but it still wasn't like he's still not playing like he did last year when he was in many ways a dominant force. He is shooting the three ball a little bit better than he did last year, which I'll give him credit for, but I want to see more because
yeah.
there's so much talent within Hawkins. And so
He's
yeah, it
an
was a
NBA guy when he's clicking. I mean, I'm like he's got one of the better looking shots in the country, and he hit a big three late, step back with 12 seconds left to cut it to 5. So that's the type of rally that Purdue had to go on. I mean, Illinois had to go on. Purdue was pretty much in control of this game, and I never really thought they were going to lose this game, even though it ends up a 5 point deficit. But you're right. I feel like he's the guy that needs to step up. Ty Rogers is a highly ranked recruit. They haven't gotten a ton out of points production wise. I will say Quincy Guerrier has really stepped up. He was
mhm.
with Syracuse, then went to Oregon, now with Illinois. Last 5 or 6 games, I think he's been hovering around 20 per game and is just a dunking machine. He's the type of player that when he was at Syracuse, and I followed his career closely because he started at Syracuse, he was asked to play inside and not shoot a lot. And he kind of fell in love with shooting the jump shot because NBA scouts thought, all right, if you can prove you can make a jumper, then you have the athleticism, you have the makeup to be an NBA player. Well, he's just not really a terrific jump shooter. Like he's better off in the college game playing inside the painted area. And that's what Coach Boeheim wanted him to do. And he just wanted to go shoot jumpers. Well, he went to Oregon and he got to shoot jumpers. And Dana Altman was like, come here, and that's what you get to do. And it did not go well. I mean, he didn't shoot a good percentage from three. Oregon was fine with him. He was putting up points, but he was all jump shooting. And now he has gotten back to they're drawing lob plays for him. They're getting the ball to him in the dunker spot. And that's where he can be like a very strong college basketball player. So it's kind of come full circle for him.
I think that now the question for me is with Illinois, I guess, and with Purdue and with the Big Ten is with because to me the Shannon thing takes Illinois out of that kind of Big Ten number one tier. Unfortunately, they can work that. You can prove it to me, Illinois. Prove to me that without him, you can still be that team. But to me now, all of a sudden, the challengers for Purdue at the top of the league are really limited. Michigan State still has shown flashes. They have been so down to start the year, and it still hasn't been completely pretty. But this Big Ten all of a sudden is so one team lopsided to me in a lot of ways. Is Purdue just going to run away with this now? Is it that simple in the Big Ten? I don't want it to be that simple, Tim.
Yeah, so I think they will probably run away with the Big Ten. The question really is, are they primed for a better run in the NCAA tournament? I will say I've been hard on the guard play and how they haven't really changed the makeup of their roster. Well, Braden Smith is playing really well, and he's shooting 48% from three. So if he's going to knock down jumpers, if he's like, they were playing a ton of drop coverage with Edie, Illinois. And Smith was just really smart in those situations. He was getting to his spot like by the elbow and hitting floaters because there's so much space there. I mean, drop coverage basically meaning that the big who's guarding Edie falls all the way back into the paint because they just don't want to get passed by Edie on a pick and roll type of play. And it is fascinating to just watch like the chess game when teams are trying to cover Zach Edey different ways and throw different wrinkles at Purdue. And you got to give Matt Painter a lot of credit because they run some of the best stuff in college basketball. I'm not breaking news here, but when you sit down and actually watch a game of theirs closely and you just try to figure out what play is happening, I mean, it's sophisticated stuff on offense that not a lot of teams are running in college basketball. And they have good adjustments in game when Edie is put in a double team or the opposing team shifts their defensive philosophy against Edie. and they do feel like the surrounding pieces are playing better. Now, it's not like Smith all of a sudden is a totally different player. It's just he didn't do it in the tournament last year. He was young, and Fletcher Lawyer as well is shooting 40% from three, 10 points per game. So as a team right now, Purdue is shooting 39% from three. If they make their threes in the tournament, like they're going to get looks because it's impossible to eliminate 3-point shooting and Zach Edey. And, teams can try, but if they make their threes, they're going to be a really tough out. I think everyone is quick to assume that this is going to be a different Purdue team in the tournament. They're playing like it, but I just wonder when the lights are the brightest if the shots are still going to fall. And as of right now, in all these big games, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer have kind of proven me wrong and played really well.
You said it there pretty succinctly. Braden Smith is still Braden Smith in the sense that he's kind of due for a stinker.
Yeah,
And
right.
he's played so well that it's almost like, I don't believe it yet. I'm not so sure. Because like we've seen him play really, really well, but then he's always followed that up with a game where not that he loses it for Purdue, but they need him to play really well and he doesn't come through. But as they do feel just so steady, and like there are obvious flaws to some things about Purdue, but they have more ways to kind of, okay, if one thing goes wrong, we have this backup plan this year, and if this then goes wrong, we have this way to fill that gap. And it just a big part of that is the offense, and how when Edey gets the ball, how much movement there is around him to get open shots, and how good he still is night in, night out. Like, it can't be forgotten that he is still the dominant force of college basketball. Like, there's nobody that's stopping that guy. So you're relying on an off night from him, like Illinois got. Illinois got an off night from Edey when Illinois plays Purdue, and they still took a good swing at him. And it just so happened that the guards and the 4-man put up 20 something, and Purdue were able to fill enough gaps around Edey. So to me, Purdue are on that Virginia path, right, where they get upset round
Yeah.
one by 16, and they just makes their program come closer together and figure out a lot and do a lot of learning in the offseason. They are kind of in that trajectory, at least at this point in the year.
It would be a good story, and it would finally put to bed, Big Ted can't win the title and all that, or at least the drought would end, going back to the early 2000s when Michigan State won a title. Where else, or what else stood out from maybe this past weekend? I think at some point we probably need to talk about this Kansas TCU kind of controversial ending. We could touch on Houston, but anything else that's sort of top of mind for you?
There's one game that I just wanted to do a bit of a throwback to from kind of over holiday break, actually. And this is just an in case you missed it for any college basketball fans out there, because this game has been my favorite game of the year so far. I know I did a similar lead into Michigan Penn State, but FAU Arizona, Tim, was real hoops. That
Yeah.
that game was awesome. Double overtime with Caleb Love and John L. Davis trading big shots, players fouling out from FAU, Arizona basically just telling Caleb Love, "We trust you. Go be the man." And Caleb Love is my favorite player in college basketball. I'll say it. Like, that dude just walks into the gym and believes it is his destiny to hit the buzzer beater every single time. And it does not matter what team he's played on. That is still the same old Caleb Love that we got in the North Carolina run to the Final Four. And watching him and John L. Davis just trade big buckets down the stretch in overtime, in double overtime. It's my favorite college basketball game of the year. And I mean, Arizona continues to be so up and down. They lost to Stanford after they lost this one. FAU comes away with the double overtime win. And I would talk a little bit about FAU too, because they just had a confusing loss to Charlotte. But that game was just, it's two teams that clearly are volatile, can beat anybody, I think, in the country. But they've also proven that they both will lose the bad game as well. Just a really fun basketball game between two well-coached teams with star players trading big buckets.
Yeah, that's a good call. It's kind of two modern college basketball teams that are running offenses that are pretty volatile. They shoot a lot of threes, and on some nights they look unbeatable. I mean, it's kind of staggering when you look at Arizona's recent games. They lost that Florida Atlantic game in double overtime you're talking about. Then they beat Cal, easy win, 181. They stay on that California West Coast kind of road trip in league play, and like you said, they lose to Stanford, and Stanford puts up 100 on an Arizona team that ranks third in KenPom on defense. It's a
Just
total
can't happen.
blowout.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird. Stanford's 81 in KenPom right now. So then what happens? Well, they come back home and they play a Colorado team that's been ranked at times this year. I think we both like, and Colorado's been a little iffy,
Eddie
but
Lampkin's awesome.
yeah, a great player. And KenPom 33rd ranked team, and they beat him by 47, like 97-50. So they give up 100 to Stanford, then 50 to Colorado. And since they have also beat a good Utah team handedly. So it does feel like Caleb Love is a roaring success to this point. I mean, even the other night, 23 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 turnovers. You'll live with that when he's playing 35 minutes and he's dominating possession. I still really like Arizona. I think Tommy Lloyd is due for a long run in the tournament here, but that's a great call out because that is probably the most entertaining game I've watched all season. And we probably said that 10 times to this point in the year. That's natural, but that one really was like gripping television because it was just such high level shot makers on the floor.
And it was so simple. Every time down the floor, Caleb Love had the ball, you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
John L.
It's like
Davis was,
watching an NBA game, right? Like star versus star, clear it out.
they
Just
were guarding each other too. Like it was just,
yeah.
I have a friend who, shout out Caleb Wilfinger. He'll just every now and then in a group chat send us like the name of two teams and say real hoops, which is just like his indicator of like, guys, turn this game on, like big time game. And he
Love
says a
that.
lot of games are real hoops, but this was true real hoops, like just big time shot making. And I think Arizona have to be the most entertaining team in college basketball. I watched that full Arizona Colorado game, even though it was really over inside the first 15 minutes. Colorado don't have Tristan da Silva, who is one of their better players. But I was watching it for our favorites, Bill Walton and Dave Pasch, and they were
Mhm.
joined by Frank Caliendo, which was an outstanding segment
Oh
where
wow.
Caliendo was for about an 8-minute stretch of game time, Tim. Caliendo and Bill Walton are just doing Bill Walton impersonations to each other. Walton was saying the most outlandish things he could think of. Caliendo was answering, and then Caliendo started doing play-by-play in Bill Walton's voice. Pasch just got up and left the booth at one point. It was genuinely one of like my favorite just segments of college basketball television of the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Arizona's so much fun. I love them. They have my heart. Caleb Love, I
Yeah,
love you.
absolutely. Yeah, they're just so much fun to watch. We say it every podcast, but I love what that team is doing, and I think they will be a long term fixture in terms of top 5 team in America.
Moving
So
on, what stood out to you recently? What's got Tim
yeah,
Leonard's mind?
let's talk briefly. I mean, I think we're probably in agreement here. This Kansas TCU game ends with a flagrant foul where Hunter Dickinson to me probably flopped. I mean, I don't know if you have a different opinion on it, but an elbow was thrown by Yuta of TCU. And I probably shouldn't even say an elbow was thrown. I just it was late in the game, and it's the type of call that I mean, they even said on the broadcast, like the CBS guy, I think it's not Sarator. I don't remember the ref who's like designed to break down, is this review going to be overturned or not? He was like, "Oh yeah, there's not much to see here. Like, let's keep going. Good game. Let's roll on." And it just totally reversed the tide of the game. Dickinson hits a bucket late, which even that one there may have been a push off according to some fans, but Kansas wins at home. I don't have a huge problem with Hunter Dickinson, the player, but it's that type of stuff that is why he's probably not beloved as a player, right? And I'll just leave it at that. I think TCU probably outplayed Kansas in this game, and it was a bummer the game ended that way.
Hunter Dickinson is the best villain in college basketball. It's awesome. I love that he is just, this is his welcome to the Big 12 moment. And it happens in his first Big 12 game. Like Big 12 fans, this is what you're going to have to deal with. He did this stuff at Michigan, and then he also hits the big bucket late to rip your heart out. Like, this is who this guy is. He's got a flair for the dramatic in him. There is no doubt about it. I can't say I love the dude. I hated playing against him when he played my
Right.
Nittany Lions. But from a neutral standpoint, I love his flair for the entertainer. There's a certain level of dramatic to him that is is a ton of fun for me. Of course, he went down easy on that flop, but part of me thinks he's like a European soccer fan with some of his antics. Like he acts like he's playing for Real Madrid sometimes, in the way he interacts with fans and the way he goes down and the way he's looking for calls. I don't have a whole lot to add other than that, but I'm thankful for Hunter Dickinson being in college basketball again this year with a brand and a team like Kansas, because I think it's good for the sport to have somebody that everybody can unanimously kind of dislike, and he's that dude to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So before we get out of here, just a couple other shout outs because we want to make sure we touch on some of the stuff that we missed here. Houston, we mentioned only remaining undefeated team. I was just glancing at their Ken Palm page, and the right column is all like defense on Ken Palm. For those that have the opportunity to pull that up, just pull it up because it's like laughable how good they are on defense. Every stat on the right is like beaming in green, which is the positive color in Ken Palm. And it's like they're 1, 2, 3 in every defensive stat. So we'll see how long they stay undefeated. I think it's a little bit misleading because their schedule just hasn't been that tough, kind of oddly, now that they're in a stronger conference. They play tonight at Iowa State. I'm excited for that. But I mean, they're a team that just doesn't allow anyone to score in transition. They're only allowing 6.3 points per game in transition, which is also number one in the nation. So shout out to Calvin Sampson. They're basically the new Virginia. I mean, Virginia slipped, and every year you can count on
Ooh,
Houston as they're a top 5 defense, like book it every single year now.
I love that take. They're the new Virginia. Put Tony
Yeah.
Bennett on watch. They're really good, right? But like Iowa State on Ken Palm is 18th in the country. That's their toughest competition all year. So can't wait to watch that one tonight. Hopefully we can get this show out for a few people to listen before that game airs this evening. But yeah, it's weird. Their first Big 12 game was West Virginia, probably the worst team in the league. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of disappointing that they haven't really, in my opinion, been truly tested these next few weeks. We'll see Houston tested. I'm not too
Yep.
worried about that come March overall.
That Houston Kansas game in fog is going to be very, very exciting
Mm,
in the near future.
I can't wait to see
Also,
Baylor's. This is way away, but
yeah.
Baylor's offense against Houston is
Oh,
like
right. We
the
talked
game
about
I
that.
have. We've talked about. It's circled on my calendar, literally, like
Absolutely.
all
That'll be a good
capitals
one.
on my computer.
Shout out to Tennessee. They whipped Chris Beard and Ole Miss, and I was kind of expecting that. But the biggest thing with Tennessee, they've won 7 in a row. They look like kind of a different team, and it's not like they were bad before. But the biggest thing is Zakai Ziegler is officially back. He has been back. He's played every game this season. He has not been effective. I remember looking at his stats when Syracuse played them in the Maui Invitational. He was averaging like 4 points per game. Well, it's getting back up to kind of more normal territory over the last 5 games. Ziegler is averaging 17 and 7 assists per game, 2.5 steals per game. When he's really right and healthy and has his burst back, he is a tremendous guard. And I think that's what's happening here for Tennessee. So that makes them even more dangerous.
He's as efficient when it sometimes comes to getting their offense going as that offense can be. The
Yes.
offense, like the offense is not going to be great, but they need Zakai Ziegler to play great to even be good. But when that offense is good, they can compete with just about any team. So I don't have a whole lot. I haven't watched much Tennessee, but you're right. 7 straight wins. They're flying up all the rankings, all the polls. Just a team to kind of keep an eye on. If you see them on your TV, check out Tennessee. Just another defensive team that when Ziegler gets it going, that's when they're going to
Yeah.
be most dangerous.
Yeah, they have more offense this year than they've had in the past. So that'll be interesting to watch how it goes in March for them. Auburn also, they clobbered Arkansas at Bud Walton. And
Ugh.
that's a Tigers team that's also on a 7-game winning streak. So I don't know. I think the SEC right now is the most teams out of any, when you look across bracketology, most teams in the field. They have 9 teams that are projected to be in the field. I was sort of on this a couple years ago. I just feel like the way that college athletics is shifting, where NIL is such a driver, I felt like the football schools were going to become better at other sports as well. And the SEC has been known forever as a football conference. Well, I think we're going to get to a point in a couple years here where the SEC is the best conference in both, because if you are good at football, then you have to be good at NIL and you're getting big donors. And then I think you'll be better at NIL for basketball. And I just kind of have liked some of the coaches in the SEC for a while. I think Nate Oates is one of the better coaches up and coming in America. Bruce Pearl has had a checkered history, but great coach. It just, you can go down the list. Musselman, good coach, good at sort of adapting and evolving to this new era and bringing in transfers. So the SEC feels like they are just welcoming this new era better than any other conference in America.
But yeah, I don't see a national title coming from this SEC this year. Do you?
Probably not. I mean, Kentucky will always be a threat, I think, going forward. And that's the thing. Like, Kentucky has always been there. So now you're just adding teams like Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn. I don't know. Like, you
Auburn's
can go
really good.
yeah. And it's weird because now Texas and Oklahoma are going to be in this conference next
What?
year. But yeah, I
Forgot
mean,
about that.
BYU
Jeez.
Cincy the other night, I was watching that. That's a Big 12 game. And BYU went down. Cincy took them down. I believe it was at BYU, if I'm remembering correctly. That was a big win for the Bearcats. But still wrap my head around some of the stuff, man. It's gonna take a while, I think.
It's just gonna every time we say one of those things, I'm just gonna be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Just
Yeah.
gonna forget about a lot of stuff. It's just
Right.
how it's gonna be. When I turn on my TV, I'm gonna learn something new pretty much every night about what teams play where and what league. It's
Yeah.
crazy time in college sports and what players play where in every league. I'm finding out transfers still right now as to who's on what team.
Yeah. I'm also, last shout out from me. I'm pulling for Rick Pitino and St. John's to make the tournament, and they're figuring it out. They're playing some better basketball lately. I don't know if you have any more shout outs before we get out of here.
I love the Big East. I'll watch every Big East game I can. Go St. John's. Go Big
Yeah.
East. You're my favorite.
Big East. Right now, St. John's tied for first in the league, and they are rebounding like crazy, third in the nation in offensive rebound rate. So
Yeah,
shout
they
out to
rule.
Rick Pitino. It's a better college basketball world when he's involved in it, and he was making some noise this morning about playing at Carnesecca Arena next year in honor of Lou's 100th
Sick.
birthday. I'm all for it. Just
Yes.
keep all those stories coming. So, all right, that'll wrap it up for Brian. I'm Tim. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. You can always watch us on YouTube now as well. And we will be back with you next week on the Just College Hoops Show.